Happy Thursday. This is the Coffee and Coaches conference call. I have Neuro Coffee in hand and it's perfect, as if there was any doubt. So Logan Morrison is a first baseman for the Milwaukee Brewers. And so Dwight knows him, and then Josh Lindblom is a pitcher for the Brewers. Just signed with them for this season, unfortunately, but they haven't been able to play. Anyway, so Logan does coffee reviews on his Instagram, and he reviewed Neuro Coffee. And so he had to throw in the tagline where he takes the sip and says that it's perfect. So I got a little shout out there. That was kind of cool.
I got a question. It's kind of off the bat. How young is too young? Start looking at interventions for kind of how the kid's set up. Like my son's 2, but he is severely anteriorly tilted. His thorax is very forward, compressed posteriorly. Every time he runs, he basically falls and catches himself. So it is his style of running. So obviously you're watching it as a coach, and it hurts.
Yeah. So yeah, I think you're just that your job is just make sure that he's exposed to a number of different environments and let him adapt.
Yeah. Right? And that's what we do.
Like I think the worst thing you could do under those circumstances is to try to restrict his behaviors. Right. What we want is broad exposures of behaviors. Kids figure stuff out. And there's concerns like, oh, is this normal? It's like, yeah, absolutely, it's normal. It's like they just found a strategy that worked, and they're going to play with that for a while, and then they're going to do something else. So it's like it's not like there's something wrong with them. It's just a matter of like, this is how we figured it out for right now. Mm-hmm. And the thing that you want to recognize is like just expose them to a number of different environments. So, if you take him outside and you're like crawling around in the grass, he's going to be in a totally different position. And that's what we're shooting for. We just want lots of exposure. If you ever like have an interest in that kind of developmental stuff, Esther Thelen, Thelen, Esther Thelen, she looks at the neonatal development from a dynamical systems perspective rather than the milestone reflexes, because a baby's head's about 1/3 of his body weight, right? It's one of the reasons why babies squat so well, but they can't hinge, right? Because their melon's too heavy. If they try to do an RDL, they face plant. Right, and so people get so excited about, oh, look at the baby, he's got a perfect squat. He didn't have a choice, right? He had to do it that way, and so I don't like giving credit to the youngins, for being such great squatters. It's like they're just figuring out, based on the system, like what is available to them and how to do it in the most efficient way.
How would you restructure the school system? I know this is a big topic, but
oh boy.
If you had the choice, how would you design it?
Tough call. I think that the easiest thing to do under these circumstances is look at what's going on now. Okay, what do you not like about it? Right? So the number one on all counts is the static element, right? And then this is a bias from being an exercise guy too, right? You think about all of the creativity that comes from movement and figuring things out from that perspective, and problem solving that from that perspective is really, really powerful. We know the impact of exercise on the brain, and so number one, there should be a foundation of movement and activity that should be standard, right? So when I went up through elementary school, we had 3 recesses a day. And now I don't even know, see, do they even have recess for the elementary kids?
I don't know, they had recess when I was in elementary school.
Oh, did they?
Yeah.
Do you know, Steve?
Yeah, elementary level, but middle school, high school, it's pretty much lunch. I mean,
then
middle school lunch, but yeah.
Yeah, and then you have to have like 1 semester of gym class in 4 years of high school. Am I correct? Yeah.
Something like that, yeah.
And you read a book like Spark. Have you ever read Spark? Okay, it's a quick read, great book, and it's all about neurocoffee. So neurocoffee has brain-derived neurotrophic factor in it.
Okay.
So the book Spark is John Rady, I believe, is the author. Anyway, they did a lot of research, and it was a school system in Chicago or outside of Chicago, Naperville maybe. And they brought kids in that were having trouble with grades and such, and they brought them in and they gave them a special gym class, and it was all about driving up their fitness levels, and they had significant improvement in their ability to raise their grades, especially within the first 3 hours of their exercise exposure. So they even narrowed it down that far. And so they were looking at like, okay, well, why is that? And then they look at all of the elements that increase that are associated with exercise. So you have brain-derived neurotrophic factor, so that makes new neurons. And then you had a vascular endothelial growth factor, which contributes to the blood flow. And then fibroblast growth factor, which is again another cellular. It's like they call it miracle grow for the brain, right? So so exercise would be that'd be the first thing I do would be movement based, and then the way you grade it is not like on some sort of like generalized standard. You grade it to that person. So each individual has goals that they have to meet as an individual, right? So it's like used to be like when we went to gym class, like you had to show up so many times, and if you forgot your gym clothes on so many days, then you got reduced a letter grade or something ridiculous like that. Like that's the standard. So you have to have a fitness standard of some sort, but it's got to be individualized. Okay, so that would be the foundation of everything, because movement promotes the creativity and then problem solving. So right away, you already have a kid that's primed for learning, and I think that's the first and foremost thing. I realize that there's some things that kids have to learn, but beyond foundational math, like so somebody's stomach just went off. Foundational math, foundational sciences, things like that. I think you have to have those in there, but then I would say that you probably want to have something art derived there again to promote creativity. And then life skills.
Yeah, that's a huge one that's missing.
Like my brother, 5 years older than me, and he had to take a home ec class in high school. So he had to learn how to cook for himself.
Yeah.
How to sew, right? And again, it sounds stupid, but I didn't get married until I was in my 30s. So I had, decade and a half, maybe a little bit more, of where I had to like fend for myself, right? And if you don't take the time to learn these things, then you're the guy that's eating all the fast food.
Yeah.
So, but again, just like life skills like that, and just things that like, hey, simple toilet repair. I would love to have that, because I got a toilet right now that does not shut up, right? Or I should have become a plumber, because they're apparently doing very well right now. Those types of skills. But again, like all that kind of stuff, like making a good human, but with a foundational science background, so that they can speak intelligently about a number of different things, right? Rather than having these standardized tests that they're teaching, and I don't know,
regurgitation.
You speak to this better than I can on any level. It's like they're teaching classes to pass a test. They're not teaching humans to be great people.
I think it goes back to what you're saying, Bill. I think there needs to be more emphasis on movement, and just like, I do it all the time for my kids, is like taking them on a walk. I'm like, all right, we got 70 minutes of class. Let's do history stuff, and then we're going to go for a walk for like 10 minutes, 15 minutes, and just get outside. So.
It's so simple an idea. The way that you challenge people is you take them up to their self-image, like whatever they believe their capabilities are, and you try to keep them as close to that as you can, because if it's too easy, then the attention span goes down. If it's too hard, then they give up. So there's a sweet spot in there. If you read Rise of Superman is another nice little book. It's a better read than trying to read Csikszentmihalyi's Flow, which put me to sleep because of all the creativity and the thoughts. And I talk about walking and stuff. When you have a question or a problem to solve, it's like go for a walk. It works great. What that does is it reduces the frontal cortex influence on the brain processes, and so then you get what's called hypofrontality, which is like that leads right into creativity. And again, great for problem solving, great for coming up with great ideas and such. So the mentee, and we were talking about something that he had read before, like early on in his career, and then going back and then rereading some of these things that you had read before, because having evolved, your whole thought process can be totally different. Your whole perspective and seeing certain things can be totally different. Things that you had thought were, oh, that's just not very useful. It just happened to be not useful at the time. And now you read it with a different perspective. You go, oh, I see how this can play into it. I see how this can work. But the cool thing about fiction, so I don't like fiction books. So my fiction is my comic books, right? But the element of creativity where you have to actually create some of that story in your head is really, really powerful, because it just promotes this process of being creative, which then allows you to carry that over to something that seems a little bit more concrete when we're evaluating an athlete, or we're trying to structure a program a little bit differently, or we're trying to come up with a solution for somebody to execute an activity. It's like people don't recognize the value of that. And so I think that there should be an element of if you're a reader, I think there should be an element of fiction, however you like it. It doesn't matter. There's like no rules and stuff like that. So the diaphragm's two muscles, right? There's the crural element, and then there's the costal element. And so they can behave differently, okay? Even during the same breath. And so there's a certain shape that is created when you're breathing under load. So if I put a load on you and you have to breathe a certain way, the costal and the crural diaphragms behave differently. So the shape is non-uniform. So people say, well, of course, the left side's lower than the right side and blah, 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 blah. It's like, I'm talking about looking at this from a side view. It's like you can see the front and the back part of the diaphragm. So the back part's the crural diaphragm, where it attaches to the spine, and the costal being more anterior. It's like they behave differently. There's a very specific shape that would take place that would be associated with the position of the ribs. So when we talk about wides and narrows, it's like, well, if the diaphragm's attached to the ISA, right, that diaphragm has to be in a different shape. Anatomically speaking, we've got a lot of problems in the way that we describe things that creates so much more confusion than it does. It's not helpful. Looking at things as if they were different. But that's, if we're basing our anatomy off of guys that did the first dissections like about 2,300 years ago. So it's like 300 BC, I think, were the first recorded dissections. And they got to name the stuff because they were first. And so if we're basing, in all seriousness, like we're basing our anatomical understanding off of guys that did dissections 2,300 years ago with absolutely no foundation of understanding. And so it's like, oh, well, we've always done it this way. Okay, so now we're back to Michelle's question about what would you change about school, right? First of all, clean the slate. Let's rename everything. Okay, because even though we're terrible at naming stuff, I think we could be better at it now than we were 2,300 years ago.